And welcome, and I'm thrilled that so many of you could join us this morning, even with the little inclement weather. It's standing room only, and it says an awful lot about our guest speaker here this morning. I'd like to begin by thanking our friend once again at the Hampshire House, Tom Kershaw, for opening up his magnificent home. There were a couple of people here for the first time, and they were in awe of the rooms, and they wanted to know a little more about the history, but I want you to know, Tom, I told them anytime they want to do a reception or a gathering, it's available. So, feel free to inquire. But it's a magnificent building, to say the least. And Tom has been so good to the New England Council over the years. I can't say enough thank yous. And he has his good friend here, Lindy, who had a little surgery, but she's doing very, very, very well. And she gives all the credit to the gentleman next to her, that he's just been I think she said something like a sweetheart. He's been just a godsend. So thank you, Tom, for all that you do for the New England Council. 2024 is already off to a great start for the New England Council, and needless to say, it's been a very busy schedule, and it continues the next couple of weeks. Next week we'll be in Washington. We will have Congressman Zet Magaziner, the Congressman, the 2nd Congressional District in Rhode Island, speaking. And here in New England, we're looking forward to a Capitol Hill report programs in the coming weeks with newly elected Congressman Gabe Amo, again, newly elected from the 1st Congressional District in Rhode Island, as well as Congressman Chris Pappas, the 1st Congressional District in New Hampshire, as well as Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. Next week, registration for our 2024 Washington Leaders Conference will be opening. We hope you'll join us for what is always a very busy and productive 2 days in our nation's capital. The conference will take place on May 15th and 16th this year. I also want to quickly flag 2 exciting new initiatives that the New England Council is launching in 2024. The first is the Rising Stars Network for Young Professionals, which will host its inaugural event next week. If you're interested in learning more information on the new program, you can talk to Ashley Larkin, who is doing our recording. It was her idea with a young lady in Washington, Mariah Healy. Both of them came up with the idea of a young professional gathering, and it's over 200 people already signed up. But they've already indicated to me that you can come as a guest, but you're not young and you're not a professional. So, and the second initiative is a new housing working group that will bring together members from across different industries throughout the region to work collaboratively to address the housing crisis in the region. The first meeting will be on February 15th, and if you're interested in being more engaged and involved in this, Griff Doherty is here from our office, who really took the lead on this initiative, and the attendance already is more than we thought, but we're looking for more participants to give their expertise, their knowledge on this important issue. Today we're delighted to welcome someone who is a rising star in her own right here in New England, and that is my good friend, Representative Ayanna Pressley. As many of you know, she has dedicated her entire career to public service. First as an aide to former Congressman Joe Kennedy II, and later as a senior advisor to former Senator John Kerry. She made history in 2009 when she was the first woman of color elected to the Boston City Council. And again in 2018, when she was the first woman of color elected to Congress from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now in her 3rd term, representing the Bay State's 7th Congressional District on Capitol Hill, she serves on the influential House Financial Service Committee. In this role, she worked to find solutions to the housing crisis, to fight racial discrimination in housing, and to focus on access to housing as a tool to close the racial wealth gap. She's also been a champion for health equity, and in particular addressing disparities in maternal health outcomes. Most notably, she has partnered with Senator Cory Booker to introduce Maximizing Outcomes for Moms through Medicaid improvement and enhancement of services. It's been referred to as the Mummies Act, to expand postpartum coverage. Needless to say, we are delighted she could join us today to share more about these important priorities and some of the current issues before the United States Congress. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to the Honorable United States Representative Ayanna Pressley.
Jim, thank you so much. I'm grateful for your leadership, your friendship all these many years. In a matter of days, I'll be turning 50. So when we first met, I didn't need readers. Been at this a long time and shoulder to shoulder with you on so many fights. And of course, grateful to your entire family, services in your DNA. You've always prioritized the most vulnerable. And I look forward to seeing you at the annual pantry event. Good morning to everyone. It is so good to be with you, to see you. I will concede that I always get a little nervous when someone is giving me a podium to stand and a microphone because I am the granddaughter of a Baptist preacher. But in that I was confirmed in the Methodist Church and baptized in the Baptist Church, although I'm doubly blessed, I'll do my best not to speak twice as long. So I guess I'll lean on the Methodist side of me today. But good morning, and again, Jim, thank you for that warm introduction. It's good to be back here. I always appreciate the invitation to be in community with all of you and to provide an update, just a little bit, on what I've been working on in Washington. I do just want to contextualize some things I may not be able to get to today. Jim lifted up my committee assignment on the Financial Services Committee, but I also chair the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force for the Pro-Choice Caucus. This is the first pro-choice majority Congress in the history of Congress. These issues were a priority of mine when it comes to healthcare justice, reproductive rights, and abortion justice. It continues to be so. So anything relative to litigation, legislation, or mobilization in that fight, I'm a lead negotiator and working on. In addition to serving on the Financial Services Committee and chairing the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force, I'm also a co-founder of the Future of Transportation Caucus, in that I represent one of the most unequal districts in our Commonwealth and arguably the most unequal in our congressional delegation. I believe that transportation justice, or the lack thereof, has contributed to these inequities and disparities. And the federal government and how it has chosen to fund transportation has also exacerbated those inequities. And so I founded this Future of Transportation Caucus to push federal funding priorities to center equity, accessibility, connectivity to jobs, education, and housing, and sustainability. And then finally, I did also want to lift up that I am a chair of the Task Force on Aging and Families, increasingly doing more work in that space, although I don't often get the opportunity to talk about it. So I wanted to bring those things all to your attention since I won't get to unpack all of that in my remarks today because after I say this little bit, I'm going to stick to my script. Okay. One, because I was an aide for 16 years and my staffs work hard on these things. So it never feels good when they're up all night and then you come in the car and write on the back of an envelope and discard the whole thing. So I've experienced that. Hi, Drew O'Brien. But before I get to that, I did also want to lift up two issues. One that was in the news today that I'm also leading on, and that is long COVID. This is a growing constituency of COVID long haulers. My disability justice friends said at the outset of the pandemic, it had the capacity to be a mass disabling event, and we do see that playing out. And then finally, I've introduced legislation, I think appropriate, and I have to say this because I'm in a library, the Book Save Lives Act. And that is in response to these draconian forces that are working and have enlisted as co-conspirators in these book bans and these book challenges. Our city halls, our state legislators, our governor's offices, and they're hard at work. And I think this is an assault on democracy and intellectual freedom. And I don't want you to think because we're in the Northeast and we like to think of ourselves as exceptional in every way, and certainly we are extraordinary, but just because we're not in the quote-unquote red state does not mean that our intellectual freedom is not under attack and people seeking to deny the representation and the affirmation of women, of African Americans, our LGBTQ community, and so on. In fact, there have been 75 book challenges in Massachusetts. Okay, so that's my little teaser. If you're interested in any of those other things, any of that other task force or caucus work, please do be in touch. I want to acknowledge members of my team that are in the room. This is Sophia Abdid, and Diana's in the back recording. So please reach out to them if you need a business card. All right, so a week or so ago, I know you all heard from our indomitable House Whip, Catherine Clark, one of the sharpest counters to ever do it. That's her job, to count. Okay. I don't know, maybe I need a little bit of bump. Okay. And I know she came here as we were facing once again the prospect of a catastrophic government shutdown, which has increasingly become the norm. I'm so worried that people are normalizing this chaos. This is not normal. And we started off the 118th Congress with chaos, and that has continued. But I'm sure you saw also that once again that Whip Clark and I, and along with other Democratic colleagues, once again had to be the adults in the room, choosing people over politics to provide the votes necessary to keep our government open and funded. In other words, and I'm biased, but the facts are the facts, Democrats had to save the day after Republicans brought us dangerously close to the edge of disaster. Again, we chose people over politics. And while I'm pleased to have averted the worst with their latest manufactured crisis, I know that the dysfunctional Republican majority will continue on this path of chaos that we have seen for the past year. Now, especially with it being an election year, hope there's some questions about that, that they'll continue to play games with folks' lives. And I will continue, as I always have, to put the people first and to fight to make sure government is working for them. It's been an honor, the honor of a lifetime, to serve as the representative for the Massachusetts 7th. And believe it or not, I recently marked my 5 years as the Congresswoman representing the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District. You can clap there. If nobody else claps, Drew, you gotta clap. Okay. In 2019, I took office in an unprecedented way in the midst of a government shutdown that had never happened before. So we were onboarded in the midst of a government shutdown, and we elected the most diverse and representative Congress in history. Since then, it has certainly been a ride. I have been governing during some of the most consequential times for our nation, bore witness to 2 impeachments. We survived a global pandemic, although in many ways we're still in that. And I survived an insurrection. And I'm asked often, given all of those things, certainly nothing I could have predicted, that I would be onboarded in the midst of a government shutdown, and we would have 2 impeachments, an insurrection, a global pandemic, and then constantly be in a situation where we are facing down the barrel of another government shutdown. And I'm asked if I am growing weary, cynical, or apathetic. And the truth of the matter is that I don't have the luxury. People are depending on me to stand in the gap, and so I will. And so since all of those, what would have been anomalies that I enumerated, we endured 2 years under the former, again, probably that occupant of the White House. We saw, that's how I refer to him. And so we're still digging out, from a lot of the harm that was caused. And like I said, now we're governing amidst the chaos and confusion of this Republican House majority. And I was remiss to mention, and I have to do this since I do serve on the Financial Services Committee, we also survived the failure of multiple banks due to the rollbacks and the deregulation of Dodd-Frank. And so the failure of SVB, of Signature Bank, and First Republic Bank, all of these things have exacerbated so many of our challenges. Of course, ultimately, depositors acted swiftly and workers and businesses and our financial system were kept whole, but it should not have happened in the first place. So in the midst of all of this, like many of you in this room, my team and I have had to be innovative. We've had to be nimble. My patience has been tested, and my stamina challenged. But despite the many challenges we face, we have been able to make meaningful progress for our communities over the last 5 years. You know, I've never believed that, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I see such an enthusiasm gap, a malaise, a detached resignation in the face of many indignities and injustices right now. When people are not motivated or compelled to civically engage, which is not just voting, but includes voting, I know it's not because they're ignorant or apathetic or don't know any better. It's because of broken hearts, because of broken promises. And there is such a deficit of trust and hope in our government institutions, and I fear, as I have a front row seat to this daily and being in community, that that is only deepening. And I feel a great sense of responsibility to do everything that I can to counter that, which is why 5 years ago, when I had my community swearing in at Roxbury Community College, a ceremonial swearing in, I worked with community members and my team to draft a community pledge, because I do believe in cooperative governing, that this has to be a symbiotic partnership. And it's by intentionally extending that hand of partnership that I hope to dismantle some of that, to restore some of that trust that has been eroded. And it's that cooperative governing approach that has always grounded me, centered on keeping those closest to the pain, closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making, and using every aspect of our shared power to make progress for our communities. And I do still have many levers available to me, although we're currently governing under a Republican majority in the House. We do still have many tools available to us to advance meaningful, transformative change. The power of the pen, my favorite as a lawmaker. Policy is my love language. It's not just a t-shirt, though I do sell it. The power of the platform, the power of convening, and the power of the movement. And I've been very intentional about that. I don't cast a vote, write a bill, author a letter, co-sponsor legislation without doing it in close consultation and cooperation with those closest to the pain. Not only does that help restore faith in government, it also is an effective form of governance. When you are enlisting those that are in proximity, you better understand the nuance, complexity, intersectionality, but also cultivate and harness the best solutions. So I'm incredibly proud of the work we've been able to accomplish in close partnership with the community over the last 5 years. We use the power of the pen to write bills like my Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act, which was informed by Boston Marathon bombing survivors. That was signed into law by President Biden to expand access to mental health resources for survivors. In fact, a marathon bombing survivor had written our office proof of the power of one person. And if an office actively listens, what can happen? Manya shared with us that although she did not experience physical wounds from the marathon bombing, she had psychological wounds and was unable to access mental health services because of a technical issue that we were able to resolve with this legislation, the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act. And again, President Biden did sign that into law. So that's the power of the pen. We use the power of the purse to deliver tens of millions of dollars in community project funding for priorities like workforce development, affordable housing, transportation equity, and more. And we use the power of the movement to move issues like student debt cancellation, which when we first proposed this was seen as something fringe and marginal that now has been mainstreamed and is a priority of this administration. And now there are some 800,000 borrowers in Massachusetts that stand to benefit from student debt relief or cancellation. And so I'm not going to stop fighting. We're at parallel tracks. I'm very involved in the current rulemaking process as we still continue the fight to advance broad-based student debt cancellation. But in the meantime, we're grateful for the strides that have been made. Governor Healy and the relief that she's afforded those in behavioral health, President Biden with the SAVE program, the income-driven repayment program, and also with the public service loan forgiveness program. There have been a lot of challenges with that that we worked in earnest to address. And so we keep ticking away at this, but that was the power of the movement. People said that student debt cancellation would be regressive in impact. It would only benefit white graduate students who went to affluent universities. And we worked for 2 years with the power of the movement to tell the true story and to provide the real face of this crisis. It may surprise some of you that I have senior citizens in my district, elders, because I guess I'm almost a senior citizen. You know AARP had the nerve to send me a letter? Okay, I digress. Like return to sender. AARP does great work, okay. But I have elders, 76 years old in my district who are still burdened by student loan debt, who at this point owe more than they ever took out, who have cried to me, I'm going to die still paying on this. They're on fixed incomes, and they have had their benefits garnished because they have defaulted on loans. So this is not just a millennial or Gen Z issue, although it has robbed an entire generation of their ability to start a business, build wealth, grow a family. It certainly is a racial justice issue. Black and brown borrowers borrow at higher rates, default at higher rates. It's a gender justice issue because 2/3 of this debt is disproportionately on the shoulders of women. And so that's an example of the power of the movement. People thought this would be regressive in impact, marginal. They questioned if the president even had authority to do anything about this. And so we're making great strides there on what is a deeply consequential issue. And again, now there are over 800,000 borrowers in Massachusetts that stand to benefit from student debt cancellation. But each of these priorities were directly informed by folks right here in Massachusetts, and that work is far from finished. I represent the MA7, which is vibrant, diverse, dynamic, and incredibly unequal. I know y'all are tired of hearing the statistics, but I'm going to keep saying them because people are more tired of living in these disparities. From Cambridge to Roxbury, life expectancy drops by 30 years and median household income by $50,000. And of course, we have many times heard the statistic from the Color of Wealth report of a Black Bostonian's wealth being $8 compared to a white family of $247,500. So when we look at the country as a whole, the racial wealth gap is over $10 trillion. So everyone's affected by this racial wealth gap. That's trillion with a T, $10 trillion. This is a shameful reality for one of the richest countries in the world. And that's why, as a member of the House Financial Service Committee, I've made economic justice and wealth building a top priority. During the height of the pandemic, many of our worst inequities were exacerbated, but we also saw how seemingly small changes can meaningfully change lives. Expanding the child tax credit. That cut childhood poverty nearly in half. We kept people in their homes by expanding mortgage and rental assistance. And we saw the powerful impact that student debt relief can have. Because during the pandemic, I led the charge with some close cohorts in advocating for a pause in those student loan payments. And many people became first-time home buyers during that period or were able to afford essential goods during a very challenging time for our country. So these are the types of policies we've been fighting for. But when Republicans play games with funding the government, our most basic responsibility, it is always those who can least afford it who suffer the most. Elders who rely on their Social Security benefits, families facing eviction, single moms who depend on food assistance to feed their babies. The dysfunction under this Republican majority has prevented us from doing the people's work and getting things done, like funding FEMA, which includes disaster relief money for communities impacted here in Massachusetts, like funding the migrant shelters as families continue to seek refuge here in the Commonwealth. It also means that the community project funding we've been fighting for, millions more for housing, workforce development, entrepreneurship, and more, is currently hanging in the balance. It is in limbo. That is the work that Congress should be doing. That is the work that is going to change and save lives. But instead, we have a majority that can barely choose a speaker, holding the country hostage every couple of months. That's not governing. And during these times of uncertainty, I'm grateful for the leadership and partnership of my colleagues at every level of government. In so many ways, Massachusetts continues to be a pace setter for our nation. It has stood in the gap on issues like abortion care, affordable housing, compassion for migrants, even as resources have been stretched thin. It is why the federal government needs to step up and provide the investments our communities need and deserve. And it is a stark reminder of why Democrats need to win the gavel back in 2024. The party that actually knows how to govern and wants to continue doing the people's work. I'm on the Financial Services Committee. When Maxine Waters had the gavel, we had 55 hearings on housing. Under a Republican majority, with them having the gavel in financial services, we've had one. This entire 118th Congress, and that took place 2 weeks ago. So we have to continue the work of delivering on the president's full agenda, a lot of which was left on the table when Build Back Better died. And that includes investments in childcare, housing, paid family leave, and protecting and expanding abortion rights. And as I close here, I'll continue to lead the fight for policies that will upend the status quo. Every session I've been in Congress, and I want to share this because it's another example of Massachusetts as a pace setter, I've introduced this bicameral legislation called the American Opportunity Accounts Act. It's a bicameral bill with Senator Cory Booker. The bill, also known as baby bonds, that's sort of the shorthand of it, would help close the racial wealth gap by giving every child an interest-bearing seed account in the lowest socioeconomic brackets. So $1,000 at birth. And then Treasury would pay deposits into that seed account for the next 18 years. At the age of 18, account holders could use the funds for only 3 permissible uses. And the projections are that that money could be anywhere from $18,000 to $24,000. So you can purchase a home, you can start a business, or you can pursue higher education. And in fact, this is, although we haven't gotten it passed federally, there are states throughout the country that have been doing pilots of our baby bonds legislation, including right here in Massachusetts, and I thank Treasurer Goldberg for leading that. And of course, along with closing the racial wealth gap, economic justice means housing justice. It's a critical determinant of health and economic and social mobility. And with the cost of housing skyrocketing in Massachusetts and beyond, I'll keep fighting for bold federal investments in affordable housing. As I said, Build Back Better died. There was a $155 billion investment that Maxine Waters led the charge for that was included in Build Back Better. So we have to keep fighting for those investments in our affordable housing because housing is infrastructure. Also, down payment assistance to purchase a home. I have a bill that does that. Stronger tenant protections and funding for those who are unhoused. But I can't do this work alone. When I say I seek to govern in partnership with community, that includes all of you too. Housing, childcare, healthcare, these are the basic necessities that workers and families require. We can't have a thriving economy without them. I need your partnership, your voice, your advocacy, your ideas. And I thank you for what you do each and every day, because all of our stamina and our patience has been tested during these most consequential times. But you all have remained committed, and you have remained innovative, and you have remained compassionate, like only New Englanders would. And so for that, I thank you. And I know we're getting close on time here, so would love to hear some thoughts or questions from the audience.
the Congresswoman's on a very tight schedule, and we want to save about 10 minutes for photos with our very special guest. If I just ask a couple of questions, and we'll open it up. You talked about the wealth gap, and a lot of that is attributed to a lack of home ownership. Black home ownership is about 41%, which is about 30% less than white household ownership. You talked in the past about discriminatory appraisals.
Yes.
I was just wondering.
Oh, thank you so much for asking about that. Okay. So, no, it's a great question. Thank you, Jim. Yes, the way to close the racial wealth gap, it's really important that we are growing wealth through home ownership, and black home ownership is the lowest now that it's been in 6 decades since the FHA was introduced. But on top of that, not only does the persistent practice of redlining still persist, but HUD produced a report around the biases of appraisers. It's just proven that appraisers have not been valuing black homes at an accurate value. They've been devalued. And so the trickle-down effect of that, and like I said, black students borrow on default at higher rates, right? So if black Americans were denied access to every major federal relief program in this country, from the Homestead Act to the GI Bill, are then targeted by redlining, and then if you're fortunate enough to even put it together to buy a home, and then the appraiser devalues your home, you can't withdraw any equity or anything to use that to send your kid to school. So they are going to borrow on default at higher rates. And so HUD put out this report to shine a light on the bias in our appraiser system. And it's one of the things I'm working with HUD on, and I'm also working with the Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute and the National Urban League, which are now piloting programs to recruit and train black appraisers. So that's one way that we're getting at that. But I do believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And so I'm just encouraged that we've shown a light on this disparity and this bias from appraisers, which are not a diverse group currently.
And you've also been in the news lately on Stewart Healthcare, that they have severe financial crunch, to say the least, and there's about 9 facilities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Some of them are in areas, quite frankly, that there was no other hospital in the area. Good Samaritan, Brockton, County Hospital in Dorchester, St. Anne's in Fall River. And these are areas that a good chunk of people who have very little insurance, and they rely on these hospitals. What are your discussions with the health officials from Stewart?
Look, I've always believed that our greatest wealth as a commonwealth is the health of our people. And I'm certainly not alone in that belief. That's why I joined Senator Warren on a letter using the power of the letterhead with our delegation colleagues, asking for information about the financial health of Stewart and what we can do to prevent a closure of their facilities in Massachusetts, which would be catastrophic. It would threaten access to health care and place undue burdens on our already struggling healthcare system. We haven't yet heard back from them, but at a minimum, what we're looking for is that they are transparent, so that they're transparent, and we continue to remind them to center the people who will be most impacted. So that's what we're looking for right now. That was the nature of our letter, just asking for information about their financial health so that we can prevent this crisis. I do just want to take a moment while we're talking about Stewart Health, because I was talking with Tony earlier. I have to just give a shout out to our community health centers. I am so fortunate that I represent the highest density of CHCs of any congressional district in the country. There are 15 community health centers in the Massachusetts 7th, and 1 in 3 of my constituents get their care from our CHCs, and they are doing extraordinary work. They have always been overutilized and under-resourced, and they continue to take more on, including now housing many of our migrants. So thank you to our CHCs, and know that you always have a champion in me.
And the other branch has been working bipartisan on an immigration bill. Democrats and Republicans. But it fell apart in the last couple of days, and the House said even if the bill did pass the Senate, we would not support that bill at all. There are an awful lot of Democratic mayors, whether it's in New York and Chicago and Denver, are very upset with the administration in the sense we don't have enough funding, we don't have enough capacity. What are you and your colleagues doing about immigration? Is there an immigration bill that can pass both the House and the Senate? And what would you like to see in it? Or maybe not in it?
Oh, I'm going to speak top line here because this is a much longer conversation. But first, I think it's important that we're honest about how we got here. In my opinion, we have been derelict in taking this issue on of a humane and just reforms to our immigration system, which is deeply broken. And that has been true under Democrats and Republicans for the last 30 years. Moreover, I do believe that there are many ways in which our policies contribute to the destabilization in some of these regions, which force people to flee. Great violence, and we see also with the climate crisis, even climate refugees because of extreme weather events. When you see these images, these harrowing images and what people are going through to get here, you must know that they are fleeing something horrific. And I'm grateful that in Massachusetts that we remain a right to shelter state and compassionate. Asylum is a human right. And so I think in this moment, what myself and certainly other members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus continue to advocate for alongside our Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Black Caucus, and AAPI Caucus, we call that the Tri-Caucus, is for an immigration system that is humane, just, and effective. And so those are the things that we continue to advocate for. One of the things that haunts me, I brought a young woman as my State of the Union guest a couple of years ago, and she's in a mixed status family, and that's true for so many, where you'll have DACA recipients, TPS holders, asylum seekers. And we were in the midst of a government shutdown, and this young lady had heard that maybe the occupant was willing to do something for Dreamers. And she said to me, Rep. Pressley, if they offer something for the Dreamers, please don't take it, because my father has dreams too. My mother has dreams too. And that's always stayed with me. And so people have dreams and they want to be self-sufficient and positively contribute here, which is also why we need to continue to expedite those work permits. And so we've seen some strides in that regard, in particular when it comes to the Haitian migrants. I co-chair the House Haiti Caucus. I represent the third largest Haitian diaspora in the country. A lot of people first learned about the number of Haitian migrants coming here when they saw migrants that were coming to Martha's Vineyard. But we have been having migrants coming to our hospitals for quite some time. So I think, in summary, this is a humanitarian crisis. It's a national humanitarian crisis, and the federal government has got to do more to support Governor Healy and governors throughout the country, because it is a national crisis. And so the responsibility of that must be equitably shared. But there needs to be robust federal investment. I'm grateful to Governor Healy, our state legislature. They have been exhaustive, they've been nimble. I'm in ongoing communication with all relevant stakeholders, looking now for creative congregate housing in places where we can give shelter to these migrants. But it is a humanitarian crisis, and the system's been deeply broken for a long time. Whether or not we can get to some place that works for everyone regarding the border and these families, I don't know. I'm an Aquarius, so I am an eternal optimist. I must say that. So I do have an optimism bias, and will certainly keep fighting, working, and introducing legislation that will do just that.
Great. Couple of questions. Just identify yourself. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Laura Winters. I'm with NovaCure, but I actually come to you today with a question from a friend who couldn't be here. She's a school teacher in an elementary school in your district. And we talk all the time about the young migrants that come into her school, and she is a reading specialist. And this week alone, she got 7 new students. And one of the issues that they're facing in the school is that first they're having to clothe those children, make sure they're fed, and deal with the mental trauma they experience just from the immigration process. You know, in terms of education, is there any legislative solution right now for, you know, helping not only those children, but also the schools with the resources they need to continue to teach them and make sure that they're learning in addition to meeting their needs?
Well, actually, that's one of the things that we've been pushing the Biden-Harris administration on, that this does have a residual effect across the board. So why can't we get money from Department of Education? Why can't we get money from HHS? Why can't we get money from Department of Homeland Security? This is not a siloed, the needs are not siloed. And so we should be able to deliver our federal resources from all of those places. One of the things I have been doing, in addition to fighting to fund our community health centers, which are standing in the gap and doing so much of that work, but is to fight and in some instances effectively deliver more money to our community-based organizations who do a lot of that kind of triage work, because they're trusted voices, they speak in the language of their country of origin, and so we've been supporting those organizations to meet some of those wraparound needs, everything from clothing to mental health supports, because there is so much trauma. So that's what we've done to date, but I'm not surprised at all that that is what your friend is saying, and thank her for being an educator, by the way.
She loves her job. Thank you.
Did you have a hand up? You know, just identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Bessie King, and thank you first and foremost for standing with humanity and for your work that you have done as of late since the past 3 months, personally. And I'm here with the Alzheimer's Association. I'm a congressional advocate, and I also want to thank you for your work for aging populations. As a millennial who has an aging parent and whose father passed away from early onset Alzheimer's, there is new research and care to fight early onset Alzheimer's and to make sure that populations, specifically populations of color, who are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's and dementias compared to white communities, have care. But there's not enough funding and resources for caregivers. So is there a chance for the federal government to make these more accessible, or in the future to see more funding placed towards the care of Alzheimer's and dementias?
I believe there are actually numerous, at any one time there are 12,000 pieces of active legislation, and there are a number of active pieces specifically on Alzheimer's, and certainly any effort that I can support that is for increased funding, I have and I will continue to. I would love to connect you with my team so we can learn more about what exactly, in addition to supporting caregivers and advancing more money for research, just what else we can do. I think I had heard that one of the fastest growing constituencies impacted by Alzheimer's is Black women. Okay. So just in the many ways in which this impacts families, workforce, but it does just beg a larger question. We need to support a care economy. This is one of the things, again, a priority of the Biden-Harris administration. When Build Back Better died, it died with it. I would have thought during the pandemic that we would not still have to make the case for why we need a care economy infrastructure, because look, you all look great and everybody's kicking right now, but at some point we are all going to need to be cared for or to care for someone. And I was my mother's caregiver in her leukemia battle, and I am so fortunate that I had a boss in Senator Kerry and a work family and all of my colleagues that I never had to worry when I took time to be where I should have been as an only child, supporting my mother, centering her dignity, advocating for her, that I didn't have to worry about losing my job.
All right.
And no one should have to. And in fact, one of the other things that I've fought for is that that caregivers are paid. Because very often there's not any sort of job that they can do and also be caregivers, whether it's to a special needs child or to an aging parent. So, the long-term fix here is we need a real care economy, and we need to invest in that infrastructure in a meaningful way. And that means home and community-based services for the disabled and elderly. It means research. So, you have an ally in me. Let's talk more about how I can be a more effective ally, and particularly in championing more money. I have had some success with that. I've been able to advance more funding in the research of autoimmune diseases like the alopecia totalis that I live with, but also diseases like lupus, which also have a disparate impact on women of color. So I'm asking my team members, please connect with this young woman here in the gorgeous purple.
I
Okay.
would just add, there's another category of individuals that are hit really hard at all times, and at a very, very, very young age. People with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities.
That's right.
So,
That's
these
right.
some of these people are getting in the late 20s, early 30s, extraordinary, but they're being hit very hard. With that, another question. If not, we're going to do photos with a comment. Drew was pretty compassionate with you. I mean,
I'm getting in trouble, y'all. I won't start.
We don't see that
I have
side
a
of
lot
it.
of folks in here that I've known for a very long time, and I don't want to start, naming names. But Drew O'Brien does stand out because this was my boss when I worked for Senator John Kerry.
You said he was compassionate. We don't see that. We don't see that.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. Love to do some photos with the Congresswoman.